My name is Gadfly. I am the founder of the Gadfly Group, which the shortest possible description I can give is that it's a political organization dedicated to getting Hillsdale students to think both more deeply and more honestly about both their own political beliefs and the political beliefs of those with whom they disagree, so that they'll be better prepared for the world they encounter when they leave this campus. I apologize in advance for the sparse seating accommodations. It's kind of interesting because in this very lecture room, I just learned last Friday about the Titanic. So let's hope that this lecture doesn't go that bad. The Gadfly Group is pleased to have as its inaugural speaker Dr. Somerville, who has been my English teacher freshman year, and who is a man full of insights and wit, and I don't think you'll leave this room disappointed, and if you do, it may be your fault, not his. So, none of you are here for me, so may I please introduce Dr. Somerville.
Thanks for turning out. I hope you can hear my voice. I'm soft-spoken. And we could just as well meet one-on-one, each of you with me over the course of the next few weeks. I wasn't expecting so many people to show up. So there's a chance you will leave disappointed. Jack had said to me, he said, Dr. Somerville, could you just share a few of the anecdotes that you shared in class? Don't take too long. And, so I pictured a group of maybe 6. So I don't know if you had copies. I had a few copies made of a passage from Moby Dick, and then there's a second handout which comes from the 18th century from Thomas Gray, the English poet. So Jack said, tell them your stories, and I ended up finding texts to work with, because there always should be a text in this class. And then I'll share a few of my stories as well. I think what happened, my understanding was, when Jack first came to me about starting the Gadfly Group this spring, he recalled some things I'd said in class when he was in freshman English, which maybe had provoked him to think along these lines of starting this group. The Gadfly Group is under the umbrella of the Fairfield Society. I don't know if the Fairfields had a group with this many people at a meeting recently. So we may have to put Fairfield under Gadfly. How many of you knew Dr. John Lease? Anybody here? Okay. I'm tempted to name this group for John Lease. He was, in a sense, the Gadfly of Hillsdale campus. those who have the good fortune to know him would know that he was always anxious to ask hard questions. I'm not sure I'm going to ask really hard questions tonight, but I'm going to encourage you to do that. So, anticipating what I was going to say tonight, I thought the weather was cooperating beautifully. I decided to turn up the heat. And certainly that's happening. It looks like it'll be that way for the next couple of days. There is a CCA going on, is that right? I guess at 8 o'clock they have a session on U.S. foreign policy and China, which I think sounds fascinating. So I'll try to abbreviate my comments so that you can make it to that if you'd like to. I'm going to begin with one of my anecdotes. It has to do with the CCA. Not this one, but one. A number of years ago, when I had first come to Hillsdale, I was new to the place, and I went to a CCA, which had arranged for a debate between Ralph Nader and some conservative representative of the oil industry. And I presume this is available on video. You can probably watch the debate. And so, again, I was new to Hillsdale. I didn't know quite what to expect. And I went to Phillips Auditorium. There was a large crowd of Hillsdale students and supporters. And then up on the stage, Ralph Nader, you know who Ralph Nader is? Just the name should suggest some things to you. He was the token representative of a different alternative point of view. And then there was a man from Oklahoma, from the oil industry, who represented this more conservative view. And this is how I remember it. I don't know if this was actually the way things happened, but I recall that Ralph Nader pretty much cleaned the floor with the other guy. But you would not have told that from watching the audience. I was completely embarrassed. The audience was, now this is the way I recall it, stomping their feet and hooting. And so my impression was that this other fellow, the conservative representative on the stage, was not well prepared. But he knew his audience. And he knew he could get by being sloppy. That's the way I read the dynamics in that room. And I was really ashamed to be a part of that evening and to watch that take place. So everything Ralph Nader said was received with, in my memory, boos and hisses. And everything else the other fellow said, even if he was ill-prepared, with voluminous applause. And so if the audience had been voting that night, Nader would have lost like 100 to nothing. And I thought that was completely wrong. And I was much disturbed and still am. So if I go back and watch that on video, I may find that it was a much different experience than what I recall. So to talk about this, I want to start with this passage from Moby Dick. Right? How many have read the novel? So after I talk about this, you'll want to run out and read it. I've chosen the shortest chapter in the book. There are only 133 chapters in the novel, and I picked a short one. And you can read a chapter a day, and 133 days from now, you can say that you've read another day. This is a little tiny chapter. Chapter 23, the lee shore. What happens here is Ishmael, the narrator of the novel, has signed on as a sailor on this whaling ship, the Pequod. And it sets sail on Christmas Day from Nantucket into the icy North Atlantic on a voyage to the Pacific to take whales. And a couple of days before they depart, Ishmael is in the inn, and he sees a crew just come back from a whaling voyage. Now, has anyone ever watched the program about crab fishing in the deadliest catch? Yeah. In the 19th century, whaling was the deadliest catch. It was a very dangerous business. The voyages would last 3 or 4 years. So you'd be on this ship. Accommodations were not particularly attractive or comfortable, and you'd sail around the world. Right? Melville himself had done this. He had sailed to the Pacific when he was a very young man. And then it was a very violent enterprise. You may have seen paintings before of whales breaking up whaleboats, dismembering whaling captains, and so forth. And so the risk was great indeed. And then to come back to solid ground after 3 or 4 years. What a wonderful feeling that must have been. Makes sense to you? So Ishmael has seen this crew that's come back after 3 or 4 years at sea, after all that danger. And one of that crew is this man Bulkington. And he's going to talk about Bulkington here. A student commented the other day that when I read, it sounds like a lullaby. So, if I hear snoring, I'll know I've been successful. Some chapters back, one Bulkington was spoken of, a tall, new-landed mariner encountered in New Bedford at the inn. When on that shivering winter's night the Pequod thrust her vindictive bows into the cold, malicious waves, who should I see standing at her helm but Bulkington? I looked with sympathetic awe and fearfulness upon the man who in midwinter just landed from a 4 years dangerous voyage could so unrestingly push off again for still another tempestuous term. The land seemed scorching to his feet. Melville likes alliteration. Wonderfulest things are ever the unmentionable. Deep memories yield no epitaphs. This 6-inch chapter is the stoneless grave of Bulkington. All right, so we're going to hear in a moment Ishmael's metaphor. His his use of the Bulkington story to make it a point. That's the sort of default setting for Ishmael. If you've read the novel, you know that you'll write a chapter about like the whale's tail. And that's awful interesting stuff. You get to the last paragraph and he creates a metaphor. So as I tell my students, a really fast way to read the novel is to read the chapter title. Okay, it's about a tail. Then just skip to the last paragraph. Forget that I said that. So there's Bulkington. He's standing there on the Pequot. He's come home from 4 years at sea. A great sense of release, of joy, of being back on solid land. And Ishmael looks up, and there he is. He's on another voyage. What in the world? Why would he be doing this? And out of this, Ishmael derives a lesson. Let's see if we can make sense of his lesson. Let me only say that it fared with him as with the storm-tossed ship that miserably drives along the leeward land. The title of the chapter is The Lee Shore. So we'll use this bubble.
Yes.
Oh. I'll draw another one. So let's draw an island. International symbol for island. So, some of you sail. Anyone here a sailor? Okay. And you've been on a sailing route, and you made it back. Let's say the winds are blowing from this direction toward the shore. So where the wind is striking here is the leeward side of the island. The leeward side. And the other side is the windward side. Okay? So when he talks about the lee shore, he's talking about here, where the wind is hitting. And if you're on a ship, this actually can present dangers. The chance the ship could be pushed in such a way that it's hard to control, especially a sailing ship. So let's add one more detail to our picture. Is everyone getting this? I'll give you time to draw this. We're going to draw a small harbor, a secure harbor here. And you're out at sea in your sailing ship. And where do you want to go? The storm is starting to rage. The winds are picking up. And you would love more than anything to get in here, right? Get off the ship, get into your house, sit down by the fire and eat some popcorn. That's what you love to do. But as Ishmael's going to explain to us, in a storm like this, the last thing the ship wants to do is to try to get to land. Because the wind could push the ship up against the shore. It's going to be very hard to negotiate getting into the port. Is that clear enough? Okay. So he's going to describe this for us, and then out of that will come his lesson. The port would fain give succor. What would that mean? What does that mean, succor? Aid, yeah, right, a deliverance, right? That's what the port offers, is that aid. The port is pitiful. That's an unexpected word, isn't it? The last thing you would expect to hear. It's pitiful, and we'll see why in a bit. The rest of that sentence sounds awfully good. In the port is safety, comfort, hearthstone, supper, warm blankets, friends, all that's kind to our mortalities. Everything we would wish for. So picture yourself close your eyes. Okay, you're on the ship. The waves are rising, 30, 40-foot waves. The sail's in tatters. You're afraid you're going to go down. And you're thinking, wow, I was back home. I could be watching Monday Night Football or something like that. Instead of going to the bottom of the ocean and drowning. So here is everything that you might look for. You would think, and yet there's that one brief clause in that sentence that strikes us as odd. I think the port is pitiful. But in that gale, the port, the land, is the ship's direst jeopardy. This is what I've referred to already. She must fly all hospitality. One touch of land, though it but grazed the keel, would make her shudder through and through. With all her might, she crowds all sail offshore. In so doing, fights against the very winds that fain would blow her homeward, seeks all the lashed sea's landlessness again. For refuge's sake, forlornly rushing into peril, her only friend, her bitterest foe. The best chance of survival then is to stay in the storm. Just keep the ship out at sea. It's risky, but it's even more risky to try to get into the port. Know ye now Elkington? You know, here comes Ishmael's explanation. Now you know what he is? It's not just a guy up there at the tiller. No, he represents an idea. Glimpses do ye seem to see of that mortally intolerable truth, that all deep, earnest thinking is but the intrepid effort of the soul to keep the open independence of her sea. This touches on our experience here at the college. Educating for liberty, is that familiar? Since 1844? We're seeking a kind of independence. That's what Ishmael's referring to. The soul seeking to keep the open independence of her sea. While the wildest winds of heaven and earth conspire to cast her on the treacherous, Slavish shore. Hearth, bed, Monday Night Football, all of those securities described now as pitiful, as treacherous, as Slavish. But as in landlessness alone resides highest truth, shoreless, indefinite as God, so better is it to perish in that howling infinite than be ingloriously dashed upon the lee, even if that were safety. For worm-like then, oh, who would craven crawl to land? Terrors of the terrible, is all this agony so vain? Take heart, O Volcanian. Bear thee grimly, demigod, up from the spray of thy ocean perishing, straight up leaps thy apotheosis. That's Melville. He's so good. That's a whale at the end there. Okay. We'll talk about the whale at some other point. To sort of encapsulate what he's getting at here, he's suggesting that we all of us, yearn for certainty. We all look for security. The world we live in is a complicated world, mysterious, often contentious. Wouldn't you agree? How many have roommates? It's a difficult world. And one thing we inevitably, naturally yearn for is a kind of comfort, security. And Ishmael is saying, you have to struggle against that. You have to struggle, fight that. You want to pursue the open independence of your sea. So as you're engaged in the world of the mind, in the political realm or in any other way, there's always, I think, an inevitable desire to just sort of pull back. So, Ellen, you sent me a link today to a blog that you have seen online by a woman who homeschools her children. And she has decided none of them will go to college because college is too dangerous. It is dangerous, or it should be dangerous. I think that's important. But there is also a danger in not letting them go. And I don't know if you've gotten the second handout yet.
Does anybody not have it? Got a bunch.
It's Thomas About this point where I expected Dr. Arn and his thugs to come grab me. I pictured torches and pitchforks. No reason to yet.
not partial. It's not right in the sense.
Okay, does most everybody have a copy? All right. The poem is from the 18th century English poet Thomas Gray, Ode on a Distant Prospect at Eton College. How many know this poem or seen it before? He wrote Elegy Written in the Country Churchyard. That's his best known poem. And, let's see the date. He wrote this poem in 1742 and published in 1747. And this poem, to me, dovetails with in its content, with the ideas I've been talking about in Melville. As I said, I think it's absolutely understandable that in a world that is conflicted, dangerous, perplexing, that we would sometimes want to withdraw into the port, right? And to cling to the narrow knowledge that we have had with us for a long time and to hold fast to that for reassurance. And there's something of that in Gray. So we're not going to look at every stanza here. There are 10 stanzas. This is a poem in which Gray is up on a hill looking down across the Thames River at the grounds of Eton College, which is not a college like Hillsdale, it's a boys' school. What in England is called a public school, which means private. So he's up on the hill. This is a common type of poem in the 18th century called a prospect poem, where you've got a speaker in the poem who's on a hill or a mountain. He's looking down at something, and then it becomes the opportunity for reflections on some issue. Gray had gone to Eton when he was a boy. He's now older. He's up on the hill. He's looking down at these boys, and they're out playing. As he watches them play, he's very much charmed, taken by their innocence and their playfulness. So let's just take a look at the second stanza. Ah, happy hills. Ah, pleasing shade, ah, fields beloved in vain, where once my careless childhood strayed, a stranger yet to pain. Careless, that is, he had no cares, no worries. At least the way he remembers his childhood may be flawed, that memory, but I feel the gales that from me blow a momentary bliss bestow, as waving fresh their gladsome wing, my weary soul they seem to soothe, and redolent of joy and youth to breathe a second spring. So he's up there on the hill, looking down, thinking, oh, I wish I was there again. I mean, that's effectively what's going on. Look at those happy little children. He watches the things they're doing. Let's see here, middle of the next stanza. Who foremost now delight to cleave with pliant arm thy glassy wave? He thinks of the kids swimming in the Thames. The captive linnet which enthrall, they've got a bird there that they've found somewhere. They're having fun with the little bird. What idle progeny succeed to chase the rolling circle speed or urge the flying ball? Isn't that quaint sounding? To urge the flying ball? Like somebody who really never played sports. And so as he looks down at the kids, he then becomes extremely disconcerted. From this point on, the poem is filled with fear. Fear about what's going to happen to these children. Because, well, they're all going to grow up. And when you grow up, as you know, unfortunate things will happen. Oh, sorry. Hate to tell you that. Okay, so let's see what unhappy things might occur. We're going to turn to the 6th stanza. Alas, regardless of their doom, the little victims play. Oh my goodness. That's one way of looking at children. Little victims. No sense have they of ills to come, nor care beyond today. Wow. I don't know that that's altogether true for children. Some children, for some it's certainly worse. But he imagines them as being in a kind of innocent state before the fall. And then he begins to enumerate the horrors that will come. And he pictures those dark elements of life as personified figures. He pictures them waiting there to jump out on those little boys. Yet see how all around them wait the ministers of human fate and black misfortune's baleful train. So the way I picture it is, okay, little Johnny and little Teddy are urging the ball to fly, and behind a bush stands death. Stands madness. And behind another bush stands indebtedness, and so forth. So that's how I think the scene is supposed to be written. And they're waiting there in ambush to seize their prey. They are that tribe of evils, the murderous band. Okay? Now, let's look and see who they are. The next 3 stanzas list, one after the other, all of these terrible things that Gray anticipates happening to these boys. Passion, in its fury, may tear them. Disdainful anger, pallid fear, and shame all wait to take possession of them. Pining love shall waste their youth for jealousy, for envy, for care, or despair, sorrow, and the list goes all the way down the page. Every one of these personified, waiting to take their victims. And then the last stanza. We each his sufferings, we each will suffer in our own way. All are men condemned alike to groan. That's so much of a downer, isn't it? This is what our life is going to be. We're all going to go. May have already started for some of you. That's what you should look forward to. The tender for another's pain, the unfeeling for his own. Yet, why should they know their fate? Since sorrow never comes too late, and happiness too swiftly flies. Thought would destroy their paradise. What would? Thought would destroy their paradise. No more. For ignorance is bliss, 'tis folly to be wise. I've always had trouble with Gray's perspective in the poem. Because from what I can see, I mean, his sentiments make sense, don't they? These cute little boys playing, you want them to be okay and always be happy. Isn't that true? I have a little granddaughter who's 4 months old. She's really sweet. I really don't want her to know about death or madness or a long list of other things. But I don't think I'm ready to go as far as Gray. I want her to grow up. I want her to have available to her all of the blessings that come with age, knowing at the same time there may be suffering. This is something I talk about in English 102, or what used to be called English 102. Back in the good old those who've had me in that class remember we talked about Erasmus and his great work in praise of folly. And folly is speaking in that work. It's an encomium, right? She's speaking in honor of herself. And she's saying, I'm so great. I give you this, I give you that. And in our discussion of that work, one thing I think we concluded was, yeah, ignorance may be a type of bliss, though it's hard to know exactly what bliss means in the context of lack of knowledge. But there are other things available to us as we grow older and acquire knowledge that are not available to the ignorantly blissful, the innocent children, right? So let's see, what could that be? The love that I experience with my wife, not available to a little child. Not at all. I wouldn't give that up for anything. I mean, it's difficult at times. It's complicated. But it's wonderful. Or the great literature that I get to read and teach. Moby Dick. I did read it to my children when they were about 6. I think that was a mistake. But that's something I could not have appreciated at that age. And I think you could probably list with me other blessings that come as we acquire knowledge. It's not just that we lose something. We may certainly gain so much. Right? But Thomas Gray, the dynamic of the poem is he wants to keep them children forever. Right? To me, that's a problem. children, people who are children forever are monsters. There's something disturbing about that, isn't there? Okay, I've got 4 daughters also, and I'm so happy they have reached this point in their lives where they're 23, 27 years old, and they have grown up so well. Very happy with that. I would not wish that they had stayed 3 years old forever. Would you? Would you have wanted to always be 3? Are you kidding me? If you think that, that seems odd to think that. Well, there's one other writer I want to refer to, and I'll close it up with a quick anecdote or two. And that is Michel de Montaigne, French essayist. And again, he's a writer that we talk about in the Old English 102. He's one of my favorite figures. And I'm going to, I don't have a handout for this, refer to his essay on the education of children. I think is wonderful. He says in that essay that one of the great functions of a proper education is to take us outside of ourselves. Not completely, right? Not to leave ourselves behind, but to bring us outside of the narrowness of ourselves, to expand ourselves. He writes, quote, "We are all confined and pent up within ourselves, and our sight has contracted to the length of our own noses." I love that quote. And then he talks a great deal about how parents should acquire a tutor for their children. By the way, he's opposed to homeschooling. Well, he says parents should never teach their children. You remember this, those who read it? Yeah. Because it creates some troubles in the educational enterprise. But don't let that dissuade you from reading the essay. It's a great essay. He says about a tutor, let the tutor make his student examine and thoroughly sift everything he reads, and believe nothing upon simple authority and upon trust. Aristotle's principles will then be no more principles to him than those of Epicurus and the Stoics. Let this diversity of opinions be propounded too, and laid before him. He will himself choose, that is the student, if he be able. If not, he will remain in doubt. Ooh, it sounds terrible. One might remain in doubt. And at this point, he quotes Dante. A quote I had forgotten existed. This is from the Inferno, the 11th canto, 93rd line. Dante writes, I love to doubt as well as to know. Now, I would not argue that a life of perpetual doubt is a happy condition. There's a quote about Melville that some of you may know. Melville, author of that passage that we read at the beginning, went to see Nathaniel Hawthorne in Liverpool, England in 1856. Hawthorne was the U.S. consul in Liverpool. Melville had not seen him for a number of years. They had been very close friends. In fact, Moby Dick is dedicated to Hawthorne. I always say, if I was Nathaniel Hawthorne and had done nothing else, I would have been happy if I had Moby Dick dedicated to me. Hawthorne did a few other things. And so Hawthorne, in recording his account of that visit with Melville, says, "It is strange how he persists, and has persisted ever since I knew him, in wandering to and fro over these deserts, as dismal and monotonous as the sand hills amid which we were sitting." These are deep, difficult philosophical and theological questions that obsess Melville. And then Hawthorne says, "He can neither believe nor be comfortable in his unbelief." I would not wish that condition on anyone. But one of the great virtues of Melville, I have to say, is he's willing to ask questions. He's willing to ask those questions. And in a way, Montaigne is encouraging that. He says, "He who follows another follows nothing, finds nothing, nay, is inquisitive after nothing. He who simply follows another without asking questions about what he's following follows nothing." Another couple of lines from Montaigne. "To change one's opinion and correct oneself, to give up a false position at the climax of a heated exchange, is a rare, strong, and philosophical virtue. A willingness to change your view, which was not in strong supply the night Ralph Nader was here." And then he says, "Above all, the student should be taught to yield to the truth." Well, so what does Hillsdale offer? Great core curriculum, wonderful teachers, excellent students. Students who I think are willing to engage with difficult questions. And yet, I had experiences like the one at that CCA, which had left me a little anxious. That crowd at that CCA was troubling. I can think also of a couple of students that I have recently made the acquaintance of on a social media site. Okay, I friended them on Facebook. Former students of mine at Hillsdale who were just part of the general population at Hillsdale College, and then they moved on. And one of them, I would have to say, is as left-leaning as anybody I've ever heard from in my life. I don't remember that from him while he was here. And I think I understand what might have happened. And the second one has also made a radical move from right to left. And in fact, it's a young man and a young woman. His postings on Facebook, I can't even read. They're just so distressing to me to see them. Now, what might have happened? Okay, maybe they left Hillsdale College and finally discovered the truth. That's possible. Maybe we should at least consider that as a possibility. I think, though, there may be other elements involved in this. The students at that debate and the two students I just referred to on Facebook, I think in both of those narratives, whatever they believed, had not been tested. This is what Jack's referring to as part of the function of the Gadfly Group. We don't want anyone to be here at Hillsdale College and to assume that she knows, but not to have ever genuinely engaged. Do you understand what I'm saying? If they had beliefs at that time, they had embraced them blindly. They thought they knew what someone else might believe, right? Someone will call liberal, or whatever that is. But what they thought the other believed was a caricature, right? A straw man. And then you might leave Hillsdale College, you little conservatives, you might leave here and go out and find that there are people who represent a radically different view from yours who are really smart. Smarter than you think they are. Smarter and more subtle than you are. And you could be unprepared for that. It's those sort of anecdotes that I had shared with Jack and others in class. I think that part of the response to this, but of course this can happen on a campus that leans the other direction politically, right? You have somebody up at U of M who's completely convinced in his progressive views, but has never tested those. Okay, hope they take care of themselves, but at least we can begin to address our own situation. I would recommend that we should be willing to risk everything, as Melville suggests we should. Be willing to engage hard questions about what you hold to be valuable or important or true. We should be willing to flee ignorant security, the sort of thing Thomas Gray seems to want us to do. And that we should be willing to pursue a true education, as Montaigne describes it. Hillsdale, as I said, since 1844 has educated for liberty. And if we're going to be properly and fully educated, it's something that will make us freer. To be trapped in our bubble, not engaged with the large questions, is to fail. Now, it's a risky thing I'm describing. Being willing to challenge yourself. My son-in-law, Jacob, just graduated from seminary. And he went to Princeton Seminary in Princeton, New Jersey. And it's a seminary where, you know, if you go there as a believer, you will encounter really, really, really bright professors and other students who will challenge you. And before Jacob started at Princeton, he met with a friend of ours, Sam Moffat, who used to teach missions at Princeton. And Sam Moffat said, if you're going to come here, you need to know what you believe before you get here. You need to be, but be willing. Be certain of what you believe, but be willing and ready to engage. Willing and ready to hear the challenges that will come from others. And I think that worked out well for Jacob. I think of my father also, who was a missionary in Korea for 4 years. When he went to Korea, he grew up in a small town in South Carolina. His father was a Presbyterian minister. And so he'd not been exposed to a place like that before. And when he was in Seoul, teaching at the Presbyterian Seminary, he made the decision to get a master's degree in Confucian Studies at the Confucian University in Seoul. I've always admired that. I thought, wow, that tells me a whole lot. We used to go to Buddhist temples to visit. They're beautiful places. And he would often go in and meet with the abbot of the temple and sit and talk with him. Listen to the man's questions. Ask his own questions. Rather than retreating to the security of the compound, if you know what a compound is, it's where we live, a safe place. And the last thing I'll add is this. If you were to leave Hillsdale and to go out somewhere else, for graduate study or to live somewhere else, if you prepared yourself the way you should be willing to, let's say, go to a graduate program, which you would find maybe not quite what you've seen at Hillsdale. Don't just go to a place where you think, I'm going to be safe. I remember when I was at the University of North Carolina, there's a school down the road called Duke. Very distressing that such a place exists. I don't even want to say the name anymore, but that school had an English department that was extremely top-heavy with critical theory, and it was very avant-garde. And I remember meeting a graduate student from that program who was a Christian who had chosen to go to Duke. He said, I want to study at Duke. I want to study with these professors because I'm going to be in the academy. I'm going to be teaching. And I want to be learning from, these are very fine professors. I want to learn from the best, but I also want to be challenged so that I'll be prepared. Rather than going to some place where people are going to pat him on the back and say, yeah, you're right. You know what I'm saying? So my understanding then is what the Gadfly Group that Jack is heading is hoping to do is to have a series of programs or meetings in which their aim is to encourage all of us to do the sorts of things that I've been describing tonight. Hope you'll join me in that effort. Thank you.